Welcome to the Subjective Professor podcast, where we reject coercion and hypocrisy. It's still Sunday, September 14th, 2025, episode 482, and Trump just does not hold all the cards. So I said earlier today, after my sermon episode, that I was going to try to squeeze something in, and basically I haven't had the time or the energy to do a episode during the week. I just get home so late from school trying to prepare all the lessons for the next day. Uh, yeah, well, anyway, and I'm just really tired. So all I do is listen to episodes and then I write something down, um, thinking that eventually maybe if I have time I'll comment about it. But because it has been 2 weeks pretty much, a week and a half where I haven't done a weekday episode. I have lots of little snippets of things that I caught. I'm not able to listen to all of the podcasts that I did over the summer. So it's just a snapshot, some things that were going through my mind, some connections that I see on the news and what's going on generally. I forget it's just exactly, but I remember listening to Andy Schectman and Eric Young. I think they were talking to Mario and Monaco 64 channel, and they were talking about basically what was going on in the world. Their conversation, along with things that I heard from the guests of Judge Napolitano's Judging Freedom podcast, um, it's not only that you can hear them on that podcast, but they are frequent guests on many, many other podcasts where they're able to actually flesh out a little bit more of what they wanted to say. Judge Napolitano, he has a legal approach and priority when he asks them questions. And so they don't get to flesh out a lot of the ideas. In others, he interrupts them, he cuts them off because he wants to focus on the legal aspect of it. At least that's my sense of it. So if you listen to those same guests on other podcast episodes, you get more of, a broader view of some of the events that are going on in the world. But all of those different episodes collectively, it becomes clear that Trump does not hold all of the cards. And I use that expression because this is what he said to Zelensky. He said, you're clueless. You do not hold all the cards. You talk and act as if you have some leverage, that you have something with which to bargain with, but you don't. You have nothing. And so if you look at what Trump thinks that he has, and again, a refrain that you hear over and over and over again is that Trump has bad advisors, whatever he's being told, because clearly he's not listening to any news. He's not listening to a reliable source, but he's relying on his advisors, and they are feeding him bad information. The economy is crashing, tariffs are backfiring, all the while the United States is being hypocritical in all of their policies. Trump fired one of the principal leaders of the BLS, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, because he didn't like the numbers, right? And he's like, okay, give me better numbers, for whatever explanation of it, like thinking that they were manipulated. Well, he should know better that these numbers have been cooked for years to create the impression that the economy is doing well. And it's just so unbelievable how he keeps saying things like, oh, this is the greatest economy ever, when there's no evidence to back that up. He just simply says it is because he's the president. It must be the best economy ever, as if he could control that. And that megalomaniac, that some people would call it narcissistic attitude, I don't know what you would call it. I don't listen to everything that he says or posts, but just little snippets that I hear from him. He just has just an inflated view of himself and a complete lack of understanding of politics, government, and life in America. I mean, he's one of those rich folks. He doesn't know what it's like at the lower income end of the economy. He has no clue. And everything that he says just supports that assertion that he has no clue. He just thinks of himself. and how he's doing a great thing, but he can't imagine the suffering that the rest of us are going through. He seems to believe that if you have and report good numbers, that it actually means that the economy is in fact doing well. But, that's just not how reality works. He doesn't realize just how weak the US military is, and that is shocking to me. The United States keeps losing every conflict that it engages in, and yet he somehow still believes that the military is the greatest ever, the greatest in the world, and it clearly is not. Because of the words that come out of his mouth, it alienates, and his economic policies of tariffs and targeting people like Modi, who's the leader of India, and they're very specific attacks, to try to pressure them to do ridiculous things, absurd things. In other words, Trump wants them to destroy their own countries just because it would benefit Trump. No, no one is going to do that. And especially since the United States is economically weak, militarily weak, no one is listening to the United States anymore. And so the BRICS countries are becoming more friendly with each other. Now, originally, BRICS was supposed to kind of come up with a competing currency with the United States, right? Sort of dethrone the dollar. But something much different is happening, something perhaps much better, in the sense that it's decentralized, right? Countries are coming to trade agreements and, how shall I say, financial agreements which do not involve the dollar. Instead of having to get dollars in order to engage in trade, they are doing trade direct between country and country. And this is much better. It's decentralized, right? There is no one entity that you can target and then take out and therefore ruin the whole system. No, and it's not like that. It's countries coming to agreements with other countries. And it looks like a complicated mess, but come on, we live in the 21st century. I'm sure people can figure it out and work it out. And so the dollar is becoming less prominent. Uh, and as a result, people are dumping treasuries, particularly countries that are being threatened and bullied by the United States, right? Why would they continue to do business with the United States? It just doesn't make any sense. And so Trump seems to be completely clueless of all of this. But then again, maybe he isn't completely clueless because he's resorting to murder, right? Murder in desperation and without any thought to the long-term effects of this policy. Just to give you a sampling of the murder that he engages in, not just the murder of Ukrainians and Russians in the Ukraine war, that's ridiculous, not just the murder of civilians in Gaza, the murder of Iranians. I mean, no, we're talking more about that, right? I mean, murder of negotiators for crying out loud, right? Uh, there's this Soleimani assassination back in 2020, which I didn't know this. I thought they just randomly killed this Iranian for some odd reason. And it came out recently, someone mentioned that Soleimani was actually where he was to negotiate. And that meeting was set up by Trump. And instead of having a conversation, Israel takes him out, Soleimani, right? Or the United States took him out. So they assassinate the person who was coming to have a dialogue, to have a conversation. They murder him. And then they killed Iranian officials who were lured into a conversation to talk about nuclear weapon to nuclear energy, right? And this was prior to Israel attacking Iran. And they murder negotiators there. And then more recently, last weekend, they lure Hamas negotiators to Qatar, where Israel murders them. This is really incredible, unbelievable, incredible, right? A negotiator showing up means that you flew the white flag, Like, let's parlay. Let's have a discussion. Let's bring these hostilities to a close. And throwing up the white flag means you're not going to kill anyone. Well, the United States has now stooped to the point where they throw up that white flag, say, let's have a conversation, and they murder the people who show up. This is just, who does this? Who does this? But apparently the United States does now, right? Just kill people for convenience, to make an argument, to make a show of force. Like uh, they want to create some kind of weird premise to have a war with Venezuela now. They want to talk about narco terrorists, right? That it's amping up the drug war. The drug war should have been winding down because it was such an abject failure, right? Even the fentanyl crisis is a result of the drug war, right? Without the drug war, there would not have been fentanyl, right? Because the more the drug war increases, then people are looking for more potent drugs so that they can traffic less of it, right? So it's easier to traffic more of it. So they use that as an excuse to murder 11 people who are on a speedboat doing who knows what. And and I heard recently that once those people on the speedboat realized that they were being watched by a drone, they turned around. They started going back to Venezuela, but nope, they had to be murdered. No one even knows what they were doing. There's no proof, there's no evidence that these people were drug traffickers. And even if, and was it Phil Magnus, I think said, or Dave DeCamp, there, even in the United States, execution is not the punishment for drug violations. But apparently it was for these people because they're not American citizens. I mean, this is so off the charts incredible, in the worst way possible, right? There is no justice, there is no law any longer in the United States. They just do whatever they want, which takes me to the next topic: violence because there's nothing else. You know, when I was a kid in the 80s, in high school, and I would listen to the news, I'd be like, of course, those countries are engaging in violence because that's all they've got. They don't have anything, they don't have freedom, there's just control. And the way to make sure that you continue to have control is you have to engage in violence. Well, that's what the United States is today. You know, you might be tempted to think that it's just the leftists, right? The radicals like BLM and Antifa that just resort to violence, right? It's kind of what Charlie Kirk was exposing, right? They have no argument after the initial yelling, right? And people like that, and I've had many conversations with people like that. Usually people, they start screaming, they're in your face. And the great thing about the university is that if they're screaming at you, they have to scream at you from their seat, right? They don't get it in your face. And you just wait them out. And anywhere between 45 minutes and an hour and a half, if you are patient enough, they get tired and they run out of things to say. And so you get to respond and you totally destroy them. All you have to do is try to remember some of the things that they said, the way they contradict themselves, and you just throw it back at them and everything falls apart. I've had many conversations just totally fall apart. Just, you know, so they talk for an hour and a half and I say something for 5 minutes and they give up. Right? That's how easy it is, right? They have nothing. But see, this is the problem. The United States government, all they have is violence now. There is no moral authority. There is nothing, no principle, no uh, nothing that they can offer other people except force. And that's all that the United States has. And so if you think about it, the Charlie Kirk assassination is basically censorship, right? So Charlie Kirk, it's rumored, it's people are saying that he turned down Israel's money and that he was starting to demand that the Epstein files be released. I've seen it. I don't know how true it is, but if that was true, then it makes sense why he was taken out, because he was no longer towing the line. He was no longer maintaining the messaging of the status quo. And so he had to go. right? So just in other words, I'm trying to say that the US government now, whether it's Biden or Trump, it doesn't really matter because they're not really in control, are not any different in principle from BLM and Antifa, right? It's just violence. They just kill whoever they want. It doesn't matter. Their lives weren't important. They don't have people who love them, supposedly. And so the Charlie Kirk assassination, it's censorship. It's straight up censorship. We don't want to hear him talk anymore. But the crazy thing is that they took out the person who wanted to talk. Like, this isn't the person who is trying to incite violence. He's not trying to get people to take up arms and have a rebellion. No, this is the guy who wants to talk, to show people that they have no argument. Uh, you know, and in place of an argument, a principle, or a moral code, what do they have? They just simply manufacture information, manufacture facts, take things out of context, defame, slander, engage in libel, because that's all they got. They have to literally make up things, twist information in order to get people really, really angry. Right? What's it? That Stephen King, the author of the horror author, you know, repeats some of this stuff, and he had to take it down because of the nature of it. He was defaming people, which makes him easily a target of lawsuits. So that's what they have. That's all they have, a manipulation of emotion. And, people are getting tired of it because emotion, is particularly negative emotion, it takes a lot out of you. And people are just getting tired, I'm thinking. And so people are getting more courage to speak out against all of this negativity, all this fabrication of information and perception. The vast majority of people want peace, right? And it's not covered by the news as much, and people don't really notice it because it's not violent. These protests don't end up burning down buildings and cities. They don't go around murdering people. They protest in peace with vigils, right? With a march. Unlike these radical communists who just want chaos and violence in the streets, who just want to overthrow everything. For what? To what end? It, I think their brains lack the ability to think that far ahead, right? And all of the violence that you see in the wars, it's coming back here onto the streets, manifesting through assassinations, BLM protests, and Antifa protests. It's getting to a point where, a tipping point. I wrote last week that there's a lot of performative behavior, and a lot of professors in university these days talk about performative something. And basically, what all these professors are trying to say is that people are faking it, right? That they were given a code of behavior that they have to follow, and they just simply perform it, right? They don't really believe it. They just put on a performance for each other, and this artificial society. And so what they want everyone to do is be the authentic, brutish animal. No codes of contact, no morality, right? No faking compassion, just hate and violence, right? Uh, Hate and violence with a thin coat of compassion, right? So, all these people were being oppressed. We're fighting for them. No, it has nothing to do with that. And again, it's that projection thing where they see everyone else as faking, but in reality, they are the ones who are faking. All those people who would say basically, oh, Christians, white society, all this stuff, it's all performative, it's not real. They're the ones who are fake. It's the people who engage in this kind of violence that we see today. They are engaging in a performance. You know it because it's backed by nothing. They're behavior, their ideology is like the dollar, right? It looks like it has value, but there's nothing behind it. There's nothing which gives it any kind of legitimacy. It just has value because people say it has value, right? And so all of these extremist radicals, whether they're on the left or the right, right? Because then you get the Christian nationalists, which are basically neo-Nazis, right? And they, by their own admission, they say they are no different than Antifa, right? So they're the right's version of Antifa. So the extremes that we see today, it's all performance, it's all fake. To what end, I really don't know, but that's what it is. It's all just fake. There's a new order, world order, if you want to call it that, in the making, right? And the United States should be and should have been a part of it. Russia, China, and now India, right? They're getting together. They're getting all chummy. People say, well, they don't trust each other. It doesn't matter if they don't trust each other. They're doing business with each other. And the fact is that the United States does business with all three of those countries, except on the sly. We can't admit publicly that we're still buying uranium from Russia. We can't admit publicly that we're still buying oil from Russia, right? We're not going to admit that. Instead, we're going to engage in this stupid rhetoric that Trump has taken to another level. It's just ridiculous. The United States should have been there with Russia, China, and India. Trump should have ditched NATO, should have ditched all the neocon warmongers, and he should have just thrown in his lot with Putin and Xi. And that's what it looked like in the beginning of his term, but something happened. He took a hard turn, and here we are, head deep in tariffs and ridiculousness. We're going deeper into war. The economy is crashing. Look, they just had this report, 1 million jobs disappeared, right? So everyone's cheering all these jobs reports like, oh, we came in above estimates and predictions. And then a year later, it's like, oh, sorry. Yeah, we overestimated by 1 million, which basically erased all of the supposed jobs created over the last year and longer. At the same time, gold and silver keep moving up like $100. Gold is moving up like $100 a week, and silver across 42, comfortably trading over $42. I talked about it today in my sermon that without introspection and honest self-reflection, there can be no recognition of wrong. People become so self-righteous to the point they become Karens, right? Everyone else is wrong, but they are never wrong. It gives people that confidence and that moral conviction to engage in despicable behavior, right? Their behavior is not despicable because they're right, and so they have the moral, support to be able to act in such a disgusting kind of way. That's the kind of world that we're living in, right? The people cheering for the murder of Charlie Kirk. I mean, it's so despicable. It's it makes me sad as a human being that people can be so close-minded, so uh, unable to examine themselves, to see their hypocrisy and all of the injustice just spewing from every pore and orifice from their body. They can't see it. But that's the world we live in now, right? So we have to prepare as best we can. I don't know how. I'm doing the best I can. What am I doing? I'm trying to stay employed, trying to make as much money as I can to prepare for my family. Yeah, listen to me. Make as much money as I can teaching at a private Christian school. Yeah. Yeah, that'll work. But in that position, I'm also at the same time, I'm trying to share information, get people to see a bigger picture. I mean, I have to tread carefully because theologically and politically, probably, and not seeing eye to eye with everyone else I'm teaching with, but just pushing against that window, right? Helping the people, trying to get people to see a bigger picture, more of what's going on so that they can prepare as well. And as for the students anyway, I try to focus only on the students to help them prepare for college so that they're not brainwashed by professors or by the news or by society, to give them the means with which to analyze information, to realize what's not true, what's fake, what's performative, and make decisions for themselves. And then hopefully to be able to return to a society where they can exercise freedom and put into action all of the creative ideas that they've been building up over the years. Well, that's it. That's most sort of my recap for the last 10 days and just some thoughts. And I probably am going to try to do this like over the weekend, have a kind of a recap episode, at least until Christmas, until I'm really in the rhythm. But I'm more likely than not until the summer when I've taught through all of the material once, and so next year it will be a little bit easier, less preparation, and I'll be able to get back to my rhythm. So have a great week, and I'll talk to you next time.